Okay, the agenda's in the chat. Just wanted to call to your attention before we kind of jump in that we did change the meeting time. I know it was originally set for an hour and 45 minutes, and it just seemed like, you know, over time, like people, you guys are all busy, and they're like, when you get to that like hour mark, people have other meetings and whatnot also. So we're trying to like make sure we keep the information compact and honor your time. So hopefully that's going to work better for everybody. So we're just going to jump in right into some data updates. Heather, if you want to.
Okay, so first off is the Tableau dashboard that we've been looking at in our past couple of meetings. We looked at the UC data and then the CSU data. And we were hoping to add in a community college layer, but we had to sort of shift our focus to a couple other projects. So we haven't managed to get there yet. But our intention is to still add in that layer. But we just wanted to let you guys know that it's not ready to go just yet. So stay tuned and we will let you know once that has been added in.
And then I know you guys are in the process. I mean, like we talked about last time, if you remember that chart of like all of the different data systems that we have going on here. The new one now for some people, some schools already had it, but for the others, National Clearinghouse, I know there's some uploads right now going on for that and for CalPass Plus. Once those things are done, I think we're going to get a little more information about the functionality and maybe some new updates. So we'll see. We'll just play that by ear as things go. But this group isn't necessarily in charge of, you know, managing those uploads. Those particular companies have their own people that are reaching out. So hopefully you have their contact information. If anyone's struggling, you know, you can send an email and we can, of course, try to get you in touch with the right person.
All right. And the last little update on this this little round is Stephanie Evergreen is, her first event is coming up next week on the 10th. We have, the last time I checked was yesterday, and we had about 35 people signed up. So there's about 15 seats left before that one fills up. We have to cap it at 50. So if you have other folks that you know that also build data displays that might benefit from the shorter version of the workshop, that's coming up on the 10th. And we still have the one on February 3rd and 4th, which is already, like there's already quite a few people registered for that, but that one will be a little bit more intensive. We'll be meeting with Stephanie tomorrow just to kind of iron out some of the final details, but we're really excited about that. But please make sure that you check out at least one of those at some point. It's a really, really strong, solid workshop that I think is going to benefit us a lot.
And so like we do at every one of these meetings, we just wanted to check in on everyone's core uploading status. I'm going to put the link to that spreadsheet in the chat. It's also in the agenda. So if any of, I think all of you might be done. You're the good ones. Thank you. But yeah, if you could just take a minute to check out where your district falls on that spreadsheet, make sure that you don't have any yellow highlighted boxes, which means that you have missing files. We're still trying to get a couple here and there, but most everyone is finished. So thank you all for being so diligent, and you won't have to worry about that until the summer. So we won't be asking you for any more files for a little bit. And we also had the core training on the 10th, I think all of you attended. So thank you for coming to that. We had a really big turnout, 96 attendees total. And then we had representatives from about 21 different districts. So seemed like it was a successful event. We hope you all got something out of it and enjoyed having another overview of the dashboard and how to use it.
Yeah, and I believe the follow-up email did have a recording of that session that we hope that you'll share with people that If it helps with the rollout at your sites, that's kind of why we decided that to put it together. And there's like a certain section that really focuses on core, because I know Noah touched upon a few other things. But the real pertinent information is actually probably about, there's like a 30-minute stretch of that video that's really solid, just about the core dashboard. So.
And another thing that is on the agenda is the list of core accounts that currently exist. So you can take a look at that list and let us know if you need any other accounts added.
All right. And with that, we get to kind of our main event today, which we reached out to a few folks to see if we can kind of build a panel just to kind of talk a little bit about how things are going at districts, what's necessary to build like the type of data culture that you want, where the decisions that we make are built on evidence. And we really appreciate Elisa and Lisa from Corcoran and Exeter kind of volunteering to do this. But we do have a pretty small group, so we can kind of like turn it into a little bit more of a open discussion. We know that there is a ton of challenges, and we just want what this is like the secondary data and analytics work group to be a work group where we kind of bring problems to each other and like work on them together, and hopefully build some community around our common practice, even though like we work in different districts that have slightly different needs. But with that, I want to turn it over to Lori, who's going to kind of moderate our panel, and I'll show the questions. I'm actually going to stop share. That way we can kind of see each other.
Okay. First question is sort of just to get started. How do you use data to drive your practices and decision making? So Elisa, if you want to jump in first.
Okay. Well, I think the first time I started hopping into data was when they started to talk about the CCI and what that was going to be. And so when they started talking about, well, a student can get, you know, marked ready this way, that way, or this way, I sat down with our main learning director, and we built out a 4-year plan for every pathway that we have here, and CTE or non-CTE. So basically what we did was we put a plan in place for every kid to get, and we saw the easiest avenue to get them, I want to say proficient, but ready is A to G, and then a CTE pathway completer. And if they didn't take a CTE pathway, then our backup was for them to take a dual enrollment. So we kind of built a plan for each student to be able to do that. So that was just one of the ways that, you know, looking at data that was going to come down the line, we wanted to make sure that we were prepared for it. A lot of times when, and then once CCI came about, then we start to look at the data and number one, see if it reflects what we're actually doing. Through the first CCI spit out, we found out that we didn't have our dual enrollment classes coded correctly. So we were doing dual enrollment all over the place, but we had a 0 there. So, you know, making fixes and changes like that. And then once we feel that our data is correct, then we start to look at it and say, okay, how do we improve from here?
Awesome. Go ahead, Lisa. Do you want to talk about how you use data to drive your practices and decision making?
Sure. Yeah, so we also look at the CCI data, and actually we as we have a team that we use to not just look at the CCI data, but all of our data. So there's a couple different hands in the pot when we look at data. And so part of it is included, like beyond the CCI, since Elisa kind of already kind of talk to that, because we do look at that to make sure and see kind of where our target is, and are students on track based on our career pathways and our A through G. And so we do use that, especially coming up in like the springtime when we're getting ready for registration. But then we also use, we use a lot of our data based off of ARIES, especially around like academic decision making and where we spend most of our time and how we spend most of our time, to really kind of close that gap for students around just like what they need. So we run a lot of reports, and we do a lot of other data collection, whether it's just students and their perception of what's going on, and not necessarily numbers, but more just informative, informal data collection around conversations and helping that drive where we go, especially now with distance learning. We've used a lot of that data to just kind of help drive where teachers go and how we've adapted our counseling program for distance learning, because that's been a big challenge of not having the traditional counseling program with in-person one-on-one or small group. So it's shifted this year. So we use a lot of Google Forms, and especially with our college or our seniors or our juniors who are getting ready for college, just trying to figure out what their plans are for next year. So we're using a lot of different avenues to try and collect that data, and then analyzing the data, and then figuring out where our like what our outcome data needs to be, and how we can shift and make changes so that we are reaching every student. So it's a work in progress.
I just want to chime in and say that I love that you're actually talking to students and using that information to sort of like adapt and change your practices. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just Lisa, I'll have you just continue, because you were sort of calling out some particular data tools there, but you know, that was the next question: what data tools you utilize, and you know, if any are particularly useful, or things your real go-tos. So go ahead, I'll let you.
Okay, yeah, so like I had mentioned, we use a lot of our reports from ARIES, and we run them all the time. Our queries we run, you know, we work with our registrar and our district data lead on pulling those reports. You know, I forgot to mention, we look at a lot of times at our we have a mental wellness group that meets, and it's comprised of our psychologists and counselors in our district. And one of the things is looking at just the mental health piece of it, and how we're collecting data around students who need the support, and how we're getting them that support. And so we do a lot of that through our ARIES, and how we code things when we put things in ARIES. And then we do use Google Forms with students a lot to just kind of collect some of that, you know, further data, rather than one-on-one interviews. So we've done, you know, group Zooms, we've done to gather some of that information. We've asked them to fill out surveys through Google Forms. We've used, you know, our CCGI platform, or California Colleges platform. We use that especially around, you know, students who have applied or started applications for CSUs or UCs or our community colleges in the area. So we run reports through there as well to just kind of see what students are interested in, what they've favorited or hearted in CCGI. So we've used a lot of that data or those platforms to gather data.
Perfect. Elisa, do you want to take that question on? Which sort of data platforms are most useful, or what you use on a regular basis?
Sure. Like we said earlier, CCI, because that is directly related to me, just because I only focus on CTE. Perkins data, if they ever get it figured out. I'm the same way. I'm an ARIES query queen. I spend a lot of time in ARIES. and work closely with the data analyst and the learning director in just pulling the data out that we need. In the beginning, when CORE was introduced to us, I was really interested in the fact that linked learning certification for gold, one of the ways was going to be through CORE, but then I think I heard in the last meeting that we were in that they were going to take the linked learning away. So I don't know if that's not going to be an option anymore. And then I just appreciate the snippets of data that we get through this group, you know, and I made a comment last time that, you know, and in the next question, I'll talk about, you know, we're getting bombarded with so many different things and everyone's strapped with time. And so it's nice to be able to get a little bit of it leaked to me, and then I can, you know, push it out to who I think it would be beneficial for.
Okay, so we will just jump to that next question. What challenges persist in your work in regard to data? Go ahead, Elisa.
Okay, I didn't know who you wanted to go first. I guess my thing, and I kind of wrote some notes down as I was looking at the questions, getting the right people to look at the programs that we have. You know, like I just said, they're bombarded with emails from companies and they don't know what is something that's not going to be useful to them and what is, and also their time. After we finished our first meeting, I made a Google Doc for, you know, the people that I thought would use CORE, and step by step, you know, click on this, do that. And then I made one for the, how do you say it, Tableau. And I sent that out because that was a different group of people that would, you know, may use that. And then when you guys came back and sent like the recording and all the stuff, which was basically what I had just created, I was like, oh, good. If they're going to send those, then I can just forward those on. But I think the big thing is, you know, once everyone knows we're focused, you know, data is a driving force that we focus on. Every company bombards you with, oh, I can collect this data for you. I can get you this data. And it just, you know, there's so many things coming our way. So you know, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have.
I just want to say thank you for pushing this information out. That's really what we're hoping you will all do from these meetings. So that's terrific to hear.
Lisa, what challenges do you feel still persist in your work with regards to data?
Oh gosh, I have a love-hate relationship with data because it's so important. We try and be data-driven, you know, evidence-based in our policies and our practices, and especially, you know, in general, I think, you know, it's just the amount of data and the time, especially for like the role that counselors in Exeter, and there's been a shift in Exeter in the last couple of years around how we've changed how the role of the counselor in the school, which is it's a really great shift and a really positive shift in the right direction. So I think it's the challenge is continuing to collect that data, and just like there's so much of it, and then having really the time to sit down and analyze that data, and then really be intentional about like what our next steps are. Because I feel like we are in triage mode a lot of the times for us, and just kind of like responding and reacting rather than being intentional in what we do based on the data. So I think that's definitely a challenge for us, is just kind of having the time to sit down and really analyze and look at the data, and come up with, you know, a plan. We have an annual counseling calendar that we map out every year of like our indirect versus direct services for students, and how we gather the data for each of those. And it's all great, but the day-to-day is what gets challenging, of how we're collecting and monitoring and making sure, you know, we're shifting to the needs of our students and our families. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge is the time that we need to be able to sit down and be intentional.
Okay, and really this last question, Elisa, you can probably answer this one. After that core training on the 10th, do you feel like Corcoran, like how are you launching your plan to use that platform? Was that training like a launching pad for you to get other users in the district, or do you sort of have a plan yet for that?
So I pretty much invited everyone that, I thought it would be beneficial to, because if you take the time to sign up for that, you have that time set aside to actually get in and see it. And once you get in and see it, then you see how you can use it and you start to use it. Not all of them were able to come. Like I'll always include my school psychologist to be able to focus in on any of the SPED stuff. My EL coach, because you can filter down to your English learners and whatnot. My director of ed services, so she can see, how students are progressing. And she's also in charge of the homeless program. And so, she can filter on that. And then we've got the director of categoricals and then my principals and learning directors. But, like I say, yeah, I just try to ship it out to them and hope that they look at it, and I'll include them in any trainings where, they may get a chance to play with it and then get a taste for it and run with it.
And Lisa, I don't think that you've had an opportunity or been issued a core account, but maybe that's something. I think that especially if you guys have a group meeting for your district or at your high school, it would be helpful to have that information so we can nudge Ken or we can just put you down for an account. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, I think that's a hard, and I don't know if other districts have this. I've only been here a couple of years, so I'm still, I'd say a newbie. And so the communication or breakdown in communication is where I think it's hard when like somebody else is giving you the data, and I'm really like the type of person who's like a visual person. So seeing the data and actually like analyzing it together as a group, I think is super helpful, and something I think that an area we can grow in.
The one report that we are interested is the attendance report, and I'm supposed to contact Noah about it because we only have the attendance report available for El Diamante. Do you know anything how much it costs for if we want that for all other schools?
That's a good question, Hiskia. I'm not sure that it would necessarily cost anything. We can ask them. I know that they probably already have the data for your other sites. They're probably focused on LD because they're one of their BTSC. But I think we can just say, hey, like our districts are interested in having that report run. Or is that the one that's built off of EdFi, Heather?
I am not sure, but we can definitely ask and get you an answer, Hiskia.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that will be very helpful to our accountability department. And also I have a question for Lisa. So you mentioned about the social emotional survey. Did you enter the result of the survey into your SIS?
So we didn't necessarily do a Google form for social emotional. We did that for our seniors and what it looks at for like their post-secondary plans. And after we did our small groups and generally we have a sit-down meeting with every senior individually within the first couple of months of school, and we get that information that way one-on-one. But that wasn't proving to be effective at this point in time. So we did more of a general survey. So the social and emotional stuff has come more either, students reaching out one-on-one, We do have a mental health survey that we are getting ready to give after we use signs of suicide, and we are getting ready to implement that at our high school and middle school come January. And so we have a data, we use a Google form, and that Google form is then collected into that Google sheet. And then we have a team of our psychologists and counselors that are monitoring that. And then we'll respond to students who are flagged as in crisis. I do know other schools have used some social and emotional surveys, whether it's through a company or they've created one on their own. But we have not given one to our whole entire school. We have Monday social and emotional lessons that are set aside for like an hour and a half that teachers give. And so a lot of times after those is when teachers will reach out or students will reach out. And but yeah, it's my hope to really get some information from students, because I have no doubt that we are missing some of our students who are in need of mental health support.
Okay, yeah, we in our district we give it to all students. We do the survey, and we just switch a company this year. Don't do much where the the social emotional department does a lot with the data. I just wonder if you put the result into your areas, but
I would. I am a big supporter of documenting all of that in Aries, because it's a good tracking tool, and it allows, that's where I pull my numbers for any mental health contact that I have. So I document like crazy any conversation, email, phone call, anything that I do in Aries, especially around mental health. So I like after we do our signs of suicide and we have that survey, I will absolutely put it in Aries.
Okay, yeah, we are using Power School, and it's not that flexible with Power School. All right, thank you.
Lisa, do you put it in the counseling tab or intervention tab? Like, what is it visible to staff, or is it just visible to counselors and admin?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, Lori. We are having that exact conversation right now, because we're reflecting on who has access to what. Teachers do not have access to our counseling notes. So at other districts I've been at, they did it a little differently, but here in Exeter, counselors log under visitation, and and then there's a few key people who have access to that, our counseling secretary, obviously all of our administration and district people, but it's very limited of who has access to that. And then our mental health therapist and school psychologist, they really log under the counseling tab. So that, which is even more limited of who sees it, but we're actually looking at possibly doing a little bit of a shift and taking, we're finding that with especially the distance learning and all the people who are filtering phone calls and parent conversations, we're looking at making a little bit of a change and restricting access even more. And then having our counselors do a little, like, say, please see counseling tab for like any SCAR reports or any highly sensitive information. And then that would be very limited of who sees that counseling screen.
Yeah, that's some great insights. And thanks for those questions, Hiskia. A couple things that I appreciate is like how you guys have both exemplified the fact that there's outcome data that we look at, but then there's like the in-process data. And so I appreciate you guys highlighting some of the in-process data that you guys look at along the way, the challenges of making time to actually do that. And I also want to call everybody's attention to the fact that Andrew Carter's been with us. This meeting, I don't think he's mic'd up, but he's been dropping some really nice comments in response to a lot of those questions, talking a little bit about the efforts that COS has had, putting money towards CTE, the reporting requirements that they have there with strong workforce, and how some of those things have changed during COVID and how they've been creating, what did he call them? Those like missing student lists, those hit lists. And also like the 3-year review process. I think that's one thing that I've heard over and over and over again. Like there's like that moment where people are like, we need data to like understand this thing better. And so there's an effort that goes out where like you either collect that data or like a system is brought in to display that data in a way that makes sense to folks. And then it's like, all right, like when do we do this? Like when is it that we look at this? How frequently do we do this? Like how do we follow up on that? And all of that ends up becoming this really difficult process to manage, because it's like you have to fit it in to all the other stuff that already took up like 150% of your time. Because I know folks are taking stuff home. So knowing that, there's the counseling calendar that you guys have, the 3-year review process that they have over at COS, and how that kind of looks, and even just like the new things that we bring into focus throughout the year, and sometimes that little outside nudge that like that sometimes is helpful. Alluding to the comment that Andrew had about COS 2.0, just kind of pushing you to kind of say like, you should look a little bit closer at this and like find a way to do that. Helpful to me is just hearing Alyssa talk a little bit about how critical the CCI indicator is. Like, I think I knew that already, but like just knowing that is kind of like the operating dashboard, if you will, of like things that are driving high school, and then trying to figure out that vector between our high schools and our colleges and community colleges. I also want to invite anybody that hasn't had a chance to comment, including Steph, who's like, we're fortunate to have joining us. We have a couple of efforts coming up. One that Joy's heading up around strong workforce, another one that Steph's heading up around college readiness. But if anybody else wants to comment or pose questions or reflect, I invite you to do that now. And thanks, Andrew, for that, that set the data free. I think that is another big difficult issue, is the transparency of some of the data can sometimes be difficult, because who has access to it is typically, like, there's a series of walled gardens around data. And it sounds like, Lisa's having a conversation that many folks have, which is like, who should be able to see this?
Well, and how it's presented, now being at the county level and seeing all different groups and seeing all these different reports and visualizations. That's why I think like the Stephanie Evergreen training coming up, where you're like, okay, we all have this data and we have access to lots of data. Like, what's the data that we need to visualize and who needs to see it, and what's the best way to do it? Like, I know simple, like this bar chart, this and the other, but what's the best way to represent it? I feel like that is going to be really helpful for me to be a part and learn from that training. So, and I think that's part of what this group is wanting to do, is bring things to you that are more meaningful. Like, so if there's, like the tableau that Heather and Javier put together, that to me, from where I'm sitting from a counselor sort of lens, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is really great information you can share with parents, with kids, with whoever, where you're like, we want to change these numbers here, we can really focus in here. So anyways, I think that's partly why I think this group can be exciting, because if we could bring something and say, we need to solve this, like help us look at this. We've got these two amazing data people to help us do that. So,
and I think the more accessible and easily understandable data is, it gets people excited because they're like, okay, I can see what this is saying and I know how to use it because I understand it. So I think that's something that we always strive for, is to just keep it as simple as possible, and just as soon as you look at it, you can understand what it's saying.
You know, I think a key thing, Heather, just kind of like off what you said was, you know, a lot of times, or I don't know how or what other data is shared with families in districts, but also just helping, you know, our larger community understand the data and how it helps drive what we do. Because a lot of families don't understand, you know, I specifically for us as, you know, where we focus on academics and the social emotional in our counseling department, that it's really, you know, helping families understand, you know, the 4-year plan, career pathways, post-secondary options, and like helping them understand that data and why we focus on certain things can be helpful in shifting the mindset for a lot of our community members and families.
And like you both noted, like there's a ton of data information out there. Like there's so much to look at, but the data literacy is not always there. So we need to do more to help in that front, I think.
Can I jump in on that note?
Please.
Please.
So here, let me start my video. Sure. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
You know, that's exactly it. The data literacy has been a very big challenge for us here. But also during the COVID times, our focus has really switched away. What we've noticed with CORE, with Rally, with just about all the data systems that, you know, tests, everything that we are subscribed to, everybody's been on full speed ahead with them because they don't have as much time. They have more time on their hands. And so lots of changes here, lots of changes there, and just trying to keep up with those in the midst of being our data requirements now, for at least me and what little there is in my department, is, oh, what are our grades? What are our attendance? And right now we're in the midst of, okay, we want to get our waiver going. And right now I'm massaging and getting our parent surveys back with identifying who's going to stay distance and who's going to do this. So our focus has really changed, and being able to push CORE out, gosh, I'd love to. I mean, you're absolutely right, Lisa. When they get in, and Alyssa, that when they get in and they see it, they just go, oh my gosh. And I remember the initial one, and then I was out for a while, and the momentum got lost there, and trying to pick up the momentum. And we were scheduled in March to really start doing some good stuff, and things kind of switched gears. So it's going to be kind of like a renaissance, although a renaissance means you had a past of it. And so that's going to be the pick and choose. I was very excited to see where Raleigh was going to go, and then we locked down. And so we really haven't jumped into that at all. And so I just wanted to find out where everybody else was. I mean, we're overwhelmed with all the data that is being requested that wasn't really normal data. Like today I have some attendance. We are creating some good positive things with data around attendance, because they do have a more opportune chance to reach out and touch their parents, literally meaning we've got to call them all the time, and they're building good relationships. And so we're looking at our school accountability or our school attendance reporting teams, that's something that we were working really hard to get. Now we're going to have that. When we come back, they're seeing how important that is. But yeah, trying to address learning loss is the other big thing, because it's just difficult when you're full distance, and we've been distance since March. So
Elisa, has Corcoran been moving with Rally? I can't remember.
You know, I saw on the last meeting that we had one teacher using it, and I don't know what teacher that is. I don't know why I thought it might have been down at the middle school. So I don't know what's, I know, you know, they asked if we would want to do it and we said yes, but I don't know where it's gone from there.
Gotcha.
I think that's those are all really critical things. There's been times throughout this whole the whole last few months where we both we're like, oh, like this, we think this would be really cool for you guys, but we also get that like the demand on your time, the things that you are all contending with right now are like super crazy. At one point, you know, I think it was Hiskia. He had gotten an email from Dave from Core requesting some data, and it was just like you know, there's just so much going on. There's so many data requests. There's so many different reports, as Mike pointed out, like all of these things that are having to go out for these additional requirements just to kind of like keep the system kind of going right now, that really are keeping us from even adding this piece. So we do I think we just wanted to give a platform to kind of voice that, and also for us to get a sense of like how challenging has it been, how difficult has it been.
Very appreciated, because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, and listening to Michael talk just, you know, like, makes me think of where a lot of us are in survival mode right now.
Yep.
All right. So with that, you know, we hope that we can kind of keep these types of conversations going. I'm going to share this other screen. Big thanks to our panelists, and big thanks to all of you guys for jumping in. Andrew, Hiskia, Mike, just for sharing your perspectives. But a special big thanks to Elisa and Lisa for being willing to kind of sit in the spotlight and kind of just speak for the group and to the group, and kind of being the lightning rod for this conversation. You know, we had actually considered bringing that attendance conversation forward a couple of meetings ago, and we were just kind of like, there's just too much to talk about and too many different things going on. So that's literally sitting in a hidden slide on the last 3 slide presentations. And so at some point, you know, maybe with your nudging, we'll kind of bring that back to the fore. Now, this is a work group, and so we wanted to get some thoughts from you guys, even though it's a little bit more of an intimate group, about like the move forward. How do we kind of continue like this work group vibe where we are working together on things and having conversations about things that like where this isn't an hour or an event that takes you away from your work, but it's something that's well spent because it goes back and informs your work. And so I know that Joy and some of the folks on her team went around and gathered data from a few different districts within TKCCC. And so we thought, like, you know what, we're going to borrow one of their displays and just kind of, we're not going to have like a full discussion about this, but as of Q1, we had this display shared with us about how things were going in terms of failure rates last year in 2019, which is the red bar, at 5 different high schools, and how things were going this fall. And I am certain that this is a conversation that many of you guys are probably also having, and just trying to figure out, like, all right, like with distance learning, like how and how are we dealing with the fact that like it's like a kid doesn't have to show up to a physical space, and like they're at least sitting in a class where they can kind of learn in an environment. They're either logging into Zoom or not logging in. And some of them like are participating fully and some of them aren't, but that can be really difficult to tell sometimes, because maybe they, you know, like you can't sometimes tell if they're engaged because their cameras are off, or they're not submitting assignments, and you never really know, like, okay, this kid has been on Zoom every week or every day this week, but like I haven't received anything from them, or I haven't seen them, but I'm receiving things. And so, you know, we have like these massive issues about, you know, like grades, which, you know, there's a lot of discussion about this. And so, you know, we were thinking about different ways in which we might engage in topics like this. I'll kind of open the forum if you guys wanted to kind of speak to the data that's kind of sitting in front of us at the moment. I don't have any specific question, but I imagine that your high school might look something like this, or maybe very different.
You know, part of addressing this and looking at last year and this year, it looks very similar. And I know that last year it ended with, you know, hold harmless. And so we adjusted, you know, I know the school sites played real hard to make sure kids didn't get Fs. And, but right now, our F rate is very similar to one of these school districts. And it's not positive. We're having problems with engagement. And I think everybody's struggling with it throughout the state. And even though we have just one school, but it's very difficult. So I think this is really good to see. But if I pulled this kind of data and said, this is what we did last year and this is what it is this year, I always know that there's data is kind of kindling for excuses sometimes. But I know that right now we're trying to figure out what's keeping our kids. And we know that we're discovering there is so much under the hood. When you go and you have to have so much contact with families, you're finding that there's a lot of struggle going on. The digital divide that had so been thrown out onto the plate right now didn't get cured just because we gave a kid a Chromebook and a MiFi. It has to do with parents, it has to do with literacy, and having the end of last year going into this year, that's going to be a struggle that this right here is going to be interesting to see in 4 years. So there we go.
Yeah, there was another graph that showed some differences between the different classes, right? So like how many of these Fs were freshmen and sophomores and juniors and seniors, and the freshman was a pretty significant chunk. And we were just talking about it yesterday, Lori, Heather, and myself, just about like what are the ripples of that, right? Like course retaking that now wreak havoc on your master's schedules and like teacher assignments and all the other things. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have more conversations on this. We're hoping to be able to kind of just put a request out to see if like, is there data that like we just kind of query out of like PowerSchool or Aries and just kind of like put a display together so we can talk about that as a group around things that are a little bit more like current in the moment type data that like, yes, it's ephemeral. It's probably only good for that meeting, but like that's the conversation that we need to have at that particular moment. Because Heather and I have access to like all of the state data, but those tend to just give you like those end of year type metrics that like, it's good when you can string it all together, but it doesn't necessarily help you kind of address what's happening on the ground right now.
You know, our curriculum and instruction team looks at and we look at it with actually all of our staff and present it. I like the visual of this, but one of our assistant principals really is one of our data gurus here. And she breaks down, especially the F data this year, looking at just like socioeconomic, what grade, there are the A through G ready, and she breaks all of that down for us and looking at it. And it's been a eye opener, or what I see is just how much it's very evident in how much we handhold for our students and our families. And just, now all of a sudden you weren't used to failing and now you are failing, and how do you, respond to that as a parent and as a student? I don't know what to do, because usually I just go to the teacher, in class. And so it's been a struggle and a learning opportunity, I think, to better our practices and be more efficient with our time. The unfortunate thing is that there's only so many of us to reach out to students who are failing, and that is very time consuming, which is the unfortunate thing, or reaching out and getting no response. So trying to figure out that. And the disengagement is a huge thing for us, but we have a code in our attendance that if students are disengaged, our teachers code them a certain way so that we can keep track of students who have logged in. So don't get necessarily dinged on their attendance, but they're disengaged, and that they don't have their camera on, they haven't turned in any work, they haven't answered any questions in the chat, or they haven't done the Flipgrid or whatever it is. Teachers keep track of that so that we can run reports and see, okay, great, you're here every day, but you're totally disengaged. So trying to reach out to those students is another data piece that we look at, which is all very time consuming and important, but overwhelming.
Very, very much so. I have been running reports for the high school for a month and a half weekly on our Fs. It's actually all of our grades, but really tracking it by the subgroups of our EL students and our SPED students. And it's kind of alarming. I know that with so many Fs, and you have to triage, and I know that we're targeting our seniors because they're the ones who are closest to the finish line, and we want to help them finish. But like Javier was mentioning, what's it going to be like with those ninth graders? And we're going to have significantly more kids who are retaking Math 1. And so that's a struggle that we all have. I don't know. It seems like summer school needs to be all summer if we ever make it back.
Yeah, thank you guys for those thoughts and comments. Definitely a lot to contend with, and things that'll be felt for years on out. Like if there is that many kids retaking Math 1, what does that do for our college and career indicator, 4 years out, our A through G rates, if we don't take some sort of action. So appreciate the fact that your districts have you guys to kind of like help respond in this moment. And I put that one in the wrong spot. So anyways, we do have some thoughts about building some consultancy protocols, and so we might be inviting folks to share a little bit more about the problem and have some open discussion. But we'll be reaching out about that. We are kind of coming up. Actually, it is 10 o'clock. So some quick updates before we turn you guys loose. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Heather and Lori to share some of these.
Thank you all for sharing. Thank you especially to Elisa and Lisa. Your insights are very appreciated, and we very much appreciate you guys volunteering to speak on the panel today. And we really hope to continue doing things like this as we move forward into the next year. We've got 5 meetings coming up for next year, and we want to have more discussions like this, actually look at a piece of data and dive into it together and hear what's going on with each of you in your districts and how we can all help each other. So this has been great. This is what we want to model going forward. So in terms of updates, we want to make sure that you guys are all signed up for the monthly core virtual meetings. There's about an hour and a half each once a month, And it's sort of like a mini version of their big convening. So you'll get to see previews of things that they're working on developing, hear from other districts and how they're utilizing core, and just have a chance to be part of the collaborative and get to know others.
And just real quick to highlight this Stephanie Evergreen training, please sign up. The first one is really just about like taking that data and being able to know like the right ways how to visualize it. And it just definitely, that first one is coming up December 10th. Please sign up, send it to the people that you feel like need to be a part of it. Her name on there is the flyer, and then the registration links are on your agenda. And we just always highlight, just real quickly before, I know we're a little over time, but you know, the Learning and Leadership Forum, that's systems equity is obviously a big push here. And when we're looking at data, equity issues do come up. And so we just have, as a county office, want to be able to offer some ideas and ways to sort of balance out the inequities that we see in our systems. So sign up for that. All of those things are free, as far as I know. So that's why we're highlighting those, just because the data drives those systems as well. And then our next meeting is January 27th. Like we said, it'll only be an hour. So thank you guys for being here today. I know it's a small group, but it was like really a great discussion. So we just really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank
today.
you.
See you guys hopefully next week.
Yep.
Thanks.
Oh,
Bye.
yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hiskia.
Thank you, Hiskia.
We'll ask about the attendance thing.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
You too.
Thanks. All right. There we go. Stop recording.